What is the scariest or creepiest thing that has happened to you when you were home alone? Story 1. I was home alone one night in middle school. I was in my room, which is right above our kitchen, watching TV. I had already shut all the lights off downstairs because I was eventually going to fall asleep and didn't want to get yelled at for leaving the lights on. So I was lying in bed and the family dog, a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, was lying next to me when I heard cabinet doors open and shut. It wasn't like they all opened at once and then shut, but more like one after another for a few seconds. I froze and looked at the dog, who at this point was an old lady, who perked up and looked at me. Peeked out my window that overlooks her driveway and didn't see anything. Now, I don't think anyone was in the house because while the dog was lazy, she was a great guard dog and she would have responded if the door opened or whatever. After a few seconds, the dog got up and started moving towards the stairs and I decided to follow, fully confident that if anyone was down there, she would scare them away. I grabbed my softball bat and my cell phone and followed her downstairs. As we came downstairs, I noticed the lights were on in the kitchen, and I dialed 911 because I knew I had shut the lights off prior to going upstairs. When we got to the kitchen, all the cabinet doors were open, which was obviously not how I left them. That's when I noticed the door was still locked, so I thought whatever this was, it was still in the house. So I quickly ran upstairs to my parents' closet, called my parents and told them what was up. They came home and obviously didn't find anyone or any trace of anyone being in the house. We still do not know why the light was on and the cabinet doors were open, but we had some other paranormal-like occurrences happen around that time, so we chalked it up to the household guest. When we first moved into the house, we had a small gathering to celebrate the closing. My brother was showing his friend the house when they went into my parents' room. They claimed to have seen green smoke in the corner. Naturally, they screamed and ran away, and when we went up there, it was gone. My brother refused to go upstairs alone after that, which is reasonable, but the weirdest part is that the dog refused to go into my parents' room and would sleep outside of the door. She was my dad's dog and rarely left his side. Another story is that my mom would regularly feel someone sit on the bed at night while she was sleeping. Now, my dad worked the third shift, so his side of the bed was usually empty, and every time my mom looked to the other side, no one was there. These things happened for the first 5 years in the house, and since then, to my knowledge, nothing has happened. My parents have been there for 15 years. I'm not really sure why it stopped, but it did. And our new dog, R.I.P. Tilly, has never had any apprehensions about moving about the house. We got him around 7 years ago. Also, nothing really threatening happened. It was mostly pranks. A little more backstory in the house is that it was an old farmhouse that my parents bought from the original family, like the house was handed down for years. We think that a few people passed away inside the house, specifically at the bottom of our stairs, as that area was always colder than other places in the house. I don't know where the spirits moved on, but I'm glad they're at peace now. The ghost was probably hungry and went through this dude's pantry for some cinnamon toast crunch. Speaking of, I think I might grab some for myself. They're my absolute fave, and hearing about spooky stuff makes me hungry. Story 2. It was raining pretty hard one night and I was about to go to bed. Our dog decided to start going nuts and barking at the corner of the family room. We had just moved in, so there wasn't anything in there, but she just kept constantly barking at nothing. I tried to pull her away, but she wasn't having any of it. She started showing her teeth and snarling, which she never usually does. I figured there must be an animal outside, so I turned on the deck lights. The deck is off the family room, and peered outside. Nope, nothing. I wasn't about to go outside because of the rain and didn't see anything anyway, so I dragged the dog to the bedroom, but she just wouldn't shut up. Finally, I decided to get my shoes and umbrella on and walk around the house. I found one of my neighbors curled up along the side of the deck trying to protect himself from the rain. He's disabled and a little slow. He usually goes out for walks in the neighborhood. He got caught in the rain and couldn't find his house. If my dog hadn't gone nuts, he might have been out there all night, and who knows what could have happened. Story 3. One night when I was really young, my parents were gone for a while and I was just staying up late, past midnight, on my desktop computer waiting for them to come home. Like most people, I had been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half of my friends on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. Out of nowhere, one of my online friends told me exactly what I had been doing for the past hour or two, e.g. what I was eating, drinking, and playing with when I had gotten up last night, things I hadn't mentioned in chat. I instantly got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. My desktop was set up in front of a big window, so as far as I knew, this person I had been talking to, who was supposed to live in a different country than me, had found my address and been watching me through the window. First thing I did was run across the house to make sure every door and window were locked, and when I got back to the computer, he thought the whole thing was hilarious because he could see me panic. He explained he was using my webcam, so I blocked and deleted him from everything I had him added to and threw the webcam away. I didn't really know what else I should do in that situation. It turns out he had somehow hacked into my webcam. I always left it plugged in even though I had been warned not to when I wasn't using it, and had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. My webcam was one of those cheap plug-in ones from Walmart they had out at the time. It didn't have audio or light as far as I knew, but I had to beg my mom for it because I wanted it to talk to my friends from school. I should have listened to her when she said it was a bad idea. The worst part for me was that I had been friends with this person for months by this time, so I had no idea how much she had seen. It's been 10 years and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape. Story 4. Once when I was in 5th grade, I was home alone. It was literally the second day my mother allowed me to walk home from school instead of staying at daycare. The phone rang. I picked it up. The voice on the other end asked for David. I told them, "Sorry, wrong number." As a weird but relevant aside, we got constant wrong numbers when I was a kid because our home phone line was one digit off from HR and Block, the tax prep service, so I developed a sort of standard cadence to wrong number calls. It almost always went like this. HR and Block? Sorry, wrong number. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. So I was on the line waiting for him to say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Instead, he started yelling that he needed to speak to David. He knew David was there. I told him I had 2 Uncle Davids, but neither are here. The guy started cursing and ranting, which in hindsight was pretty clearly fueled by anger. I was already pretty spooked, having never really encountered a fully crazy person in my life. Then he started describing my house. He told me that it's white with brick pillars and the green porch, red doors, and a white dog in the backyard. He concluded the call with,
"I know you're lying, and I'm going to come get you."
In the next 30 seconds, I rushed to get a knife in the kitchen, called my mom, and looked frantically at the front of my house. Then there was banging and kicking at the door. I screamed at a pitch I didn't realize I could reach and ran into the bathroom, the only door that locked, and stayed there until my mom got home. When I heard the garage door open and my mom calling out for me, I started sobbing and ran out to her, knife in hand. When I got older, I found out from my mom that the Uncle David the guy was looking for had struggled with substance dependence for years, and that's why I hardly ever saw him. He probably gave someone he owed money to a bad address or number. Thanks, Uncle David. My bad. I get it might sound a bit insensitive, but honestly, the part about the guy screaming at a pitch he didn't even know he had was low-key hilarious. If you're into thrilling stories like this, why not show that like button some love and jump into my channel? I've got more tales that'll make your heart race. Story 5. I was house and babysitting for a new neighbor. She was a single mom from the East Coast who moved to Indianapolis. I was a 6th grader. All I had to do was sit in the house and do my math homework while she was on a date. Her 2-year-old baby was sleeping in his room. Around 9 p.m. I got a call and answered. It's a man who only asks,
"Who are you?"
I said, "I'm the babysitter." Then he starts asking all these questions about where the mom is and who I am personally. I got scared and hung up. I called the mom and let her know. The guy calls back and then just starts saying the address I'm at. And he asks if the baby is okay. When I say yes, he says,
"How can you be so sure when he's that close to a window?"
To which I just go, "I'm just the babysitter and I'm trying really hard on my math homework. And now I'm scared and I'm also failing math." Basically, a mental breakdown happened. 5 minutes later, the mom showed up and explained that it was her ex-husband who found her. She hands me a wad of cash and excuses me. I don't know if the guy was in the bushes, calling from Massachusetts or what. It was scary. Story 6. I wasn't at home. I was working the night shift at a nursing home. I'm a registered nurse, not disabled. It was just me and a certified nursing attendant, and we were the only staff in the Alzheimer's unit. She had the TV on some stupid show about hauntings in America. She looks at me and says, "You'd think nursing homes would be haunted a lot because so many people die here." I just gave her a look and told her to shut up. This place is creepy enough at night. We went to do rounds on a resident who was in the process of passing. She was in hospice and her family was aware. I checked on her every 15 minutes because I didn't want her to be in pain or to see if she was in distress. At this point, she wasn't in distress, but it was obvious she wasn't going to last much longer. Her family lived across the country and had requested not to be called past 9 p.m., so I stayed with her, held her hand and read to her from the Bible. She was a devout Catholic. After all of the aftercare was finished, the CNA and I had been in the room for 15 minutes. I left to call the funeral home and all of that. I'd barely dialed the phone number when the CNA came running down the hallway and said, "She's breathing again. I don't know what to do." She was obviously freaked and her face was pale. I went to the resident's room and she was definitely breathing. I checked her vital signs and though everything was much lower than normal levels, they were there. I'd checked them several times after she'd passed and there had been no blood pressure, no pulse, no anything. She lived for another 5 years and claimed she'd met God. This is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. Story 7. When I was a teen, my mom was out for the night and I was home studying. I had my headphones on so I could listen to music while I was working. I guess it was around 9-ish. A pencil rolled off the table so I bent down to pick it up and as I did, I looked toward the front door. The doorknob was turning slowly back and forth. Now it's an old house and the doorknob is old, but I know the way it was unlocked was from the outside. And with a key in, the knob only turns one way. I moved to the kitchen and called 911, almost eerily calm, and told them my name and address, that I was home alone and someone was trying to come through my front door. Dispatch stayed on the line with me and said they were routing a helicopter to fly over. Did I have a dog? I did, and she told me to call the dog to the back door and then open the door and bring the dog in because they were going to use infrared in the backyard. I asked if that was safe. What if he was in the backyard? Her advice was to scream and she would notify the police en route that an assault was in progress. Yikes. So I called my poor little Cocker Spaniel to the door and pretty much threw him over my shoulder into the house before slamming and locking the door. Not much good it would do. That door had a single hung window in it. There was a large window next to it and a huge picture window in the living room. If someone wanted in, that deadbolt wasn't stopping much. Once I had the dog in, she told me she was going to hang up and call back in 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, I was to call the place where my mom was and get her to come home. I called, she was playing darts, so I told them to give the phone to her boyfriend and I told him what was going on. Apparently, he walked up to where my mom was playing, grabbed her and walked out of the bar. When the dispatcher called back, she gave me the names, descriptions, and badge numbers of the responding officers and said that she informed them they were to hold their badges to the front window before the door would be unlocked for them. They showed up, showed me badges, and I opened the door. My mom was less than 5 minutes behind them, which, considering SoCal traffic, meant her boyfriend broke a number of traffic laws to get there. That's when the police showed us the cigarette butts and footprints by the front window and the kitchen window. The mud scraped off the top of the gate that separated our front and backyards. Apparently, he had been watching me through the windows for quite a while before deciding to break in. Mighty respect for the dispatcher, the officers, and the boyfriend who did everything right that night and protected that girl. Story 8. My roommate and I had a terrifying experience a few months ago. We rent a house in a gated community type setting, just without the actual gate. You aren't allowed to solicit services of any kind in this community. That's largely because it's a not great area of town and several robberies took place via a-holes pretending to sell stuff. Anyway, I work a second shift, so I sleep in the early morning before work. My roommate crept into my room one morning around 11 a.m. and whispered, "Don't answer the door, someone's out there." So I went to check. A fairly large man was banging on my door and trying to knob rather aggressively before running to the neighbor's house and doing the same thing. I come back to our door. He was trying to force his way inside. He wasn't wearing a uniform. I yelled out that there was no soliciting and to go away. It was a bad move on my part because that enraged this man, who then went unhinged, standing in the road screaming, "I just want to talk! Open the door, I want to talk!" He was running around and trying even harder to get into my house and the neighbors. That was when I noticed a gold-colored car parked in the middle of the road, blocking the entrance of the other vehicles coming or going. It was extremely out of place. The driver had a hoodie pulled over his face and was slumping down in the seat. I took my roommate to her room, where we locked the door and called the police, who were quick to send officers our way. The entire time we waited for them, the angry man kept kicking at doors, going around to windows, and trying doorknobs of our house and our neighbors while screaming that he just wanted to talk. As soon as the squad cars came, the angry man jumped into the gold car. The officers spoke for a while out of earshot, and then one of them followed the gold car out of the housing area. The other officers told us that the men claimed to be with an energy company. They were able to produce a business card and were issued some kind of warning about not coming back. We were told to call immediately if the men returned and urged us not to answer the door for anyone who didn't know. I don't know what those men were up to, but they certainly were not selling cost-efficient energy. The license plate of the car when it drove away was from New York. I don't live anywhere near New York. Story 9. In the fall of 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and substance dependents. The owners basically turned it into a weird duplex. A friend had lived in it right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted, but I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyway, the layout of the house was weird. You walked in the door and were in a living room type space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to a bedroom, and past that was the kitchen. There were no doors. The only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom, and one led to the shared basement. So my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time, and was just feeling lonely and on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 in the morning. Cliché, I know. What woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I finally gathered up the balls to get up and check on them, and as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room, it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple of days later, a friend was visiting and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor, 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser where the shelf was perched and land between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually, I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he had lived there for 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year and they all reported the same things. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. It doesn't make sense, but there it is. Story 2. I lived in a condo. In the middle of the night, I woke up to hear someone rattling my front doorknob. No one had keys to my condo except me. And the door opened and I heard someone walking in. I was 100% sure I was being robbed. Fight or flight kicked in and I leaped out of bed and ran toward the front door, screaming, "Get out of here!" Which came out as complete gibberish, as I'd been sound asleep about 30 seconds prior and now had crazy adrenaline pumping through my veins. I was literally jumping around in my underwear, screaming and waving my arms, when it dawned on me that the 2 guys standing at my front door looked more scared than I had ever seen anyone. One of the guys held out some keys, his hands were visibly shaking, and said something to the effect that his friend had given him the keys to his place and said he could stay there while he was out of town. It turns out the friend lived directly above me and these guys went to the wrong floor. The floors were not numbered and neither were the condo units, by mistake. They didn't know they were at the wrong door and the keys were the same. I was able to get into his unit with my keys and they could open my door with their keys. Needless to say, I was standing outside the hardware store the next day, waiting for them to open so I could buy a new lock for my door. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the scariest story you've ever heard? Story 4 will unnerve you. See you on that video.